It was a bright morning at the airport, the kind where the sunlight poured through the big glass windows and lit up the terminals in a warm, golden glow. The airport was buzzing with people, travelers hurrying along with their suitcases, families dragging children in strollers, and business people lost in their phones or laptops. Security personnel moved along their usual paths, scanning screens, checking IDs, and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. Among the crowd, one man walked with a calm, measured pace, carrying a modest briefcase. His presence was unremarkable at first glance, blending in with the steady flow of travelers. Yet there was something about the way he held himself that made him noticeable to a trained eye. He approached the security checkpoint, placing his bag on the conveyor belt and stepping forward to present his ID. The officers, accustomed to seeing hundreds of IDs every hour, glanced at his identification and then back at him. Everything seemed normal on the surface, yet they had a responsibility to ensure every detail was correct. They asked him a few routine questions, and he responded politely, his voice calm and measured. He seemed cooperative, offering no hint of frustration or impatience. The officers, however, felt a slight sense of unease. Something about his documents didn't perfectly align with what their system suggested. In the world of airport security, even a small inconsistency can be enough to warrant a deeper look. The man was asked to step aside for additional screening. He nodded slightly and walked over to a separate area designated for further checks. His demeanor never changed. He remained composed, polite, and quietly observant. Passengers around him continued their journey, some noticing the scene but not fully understanding the reason behind the pause. Officers moved efficiently, scanning documents, cross-referencing IDs, and checking the man's briefcase with X-ray machines. The routine tasks were performed with precision, yet the tension in the air was subtle but present. Security officers are trained to trust their instincts, and this time, their instincts suggested that something about this passenger deserved extra attention. The man's briefcase passed through the X-ray scanner. Officers studied the images carefully, making sure that nothing suspicious was hidden inside. He had packed it simply, a few folders, a laptop, and some personal items. Nothing dangerous or unusual was visible, yet the officers maintained their focus. Security protocols are strict, and even small uncertainties can lead to extended checks. The man followed every instruction quietly, never raising his voice or showing irritation. His calmness contrasted with the hurried energy of the surrounding travelers, and this calmness added a layer of intrigue to the situation. One officer took a closer look at his identification again, double-checking the details in the system. His name appeared correct, his picture matched his face, but some of the database entries did not perfectly line up. The officers were trained to notice these things. What might seem minor to a regular traveler could indicate something significant. They decided to detain him temporarily until they could confirm everything. Detaining someone is always a serious decision, even more so in a busy airport, where the balance between efficiency and safety is delicate. The officer calmly explained the situation to the man, who nodded in understanding without showing any emotion other than polite cooperation. The atmosphere in the screening area shifted slightly. Other passengers glanced over, curious but unsure of what was happening. A few whispered to one another, speculating on the reason for the holdup. Meanwhile, the man remained quiet, answering questions in short, polite sentences. He did not appear nervous, but rather as someone fully aware of the procedures and ready to comply. The officers continued their verification process, making calls to confirm his identity and checking multiple databases. Each step was meticulous, ensuring that there was no room for error. In their line of work, even a minor mistake can have serious consequences. As the minutes passed, the officers started to feel a growing sense of anticipation. They had dealt with many travelers before, but there was something about this situation that felt different. They could not quite place it, but their training reminded them to be thorough. The man, meanwhile, remained composed, his calm presence almost grounding in the otherwise tense environment. He observed the surroundings quietly, noting the movement of other passengers and officers without interfering or drawing attention to himself. The briefcase was checked again, and the folders inside were inspected more closely. Everything was in order, documents neatly arranged, no suspicious items, nothing that would immediately trigger alarm. Yet the officers were still not entirely satisfied. Protocol required that every uncertainty be resolved, and they proceeded to make further calls to verify the identity of the passenger. They needed to be absolutely certain before allowing him to continue. During this time, the man continued to follow instructions silently, demonstrating patience and respect for the procedures. Other travelers started to notice the unfolding situation. Some tried to glance over, curious about the reason behind the holdup, while others continued walking, assuming it was just another routine security check. The officers maintained professionalism, speaking calmly to the man and each other, carefully balancing the need for thoroughness with the desire to avoid creating unnecessary alarm. Every step was deliberate, and every decision was made with careful consideration. The tension in the air was subtle but palpable, a quiet undercurrent that spoke of responsibility, caution, and the unexpected nature of the unfolding event. The man's identity continued to be scrutinized. Each database check, each phone call, and each cross-reference added to the slowly building realization that this was not an ordinary passenger. Yet at this point, no one in the screening area knew the full truth. The officers only knew that something was different, that their instincts had not been wrong, and that the protocols they followed might reveal something extraordinary. The man himself remained calm, accepting the scrutiny without complaint, showing an understanding of the rules and procedures that guided the officers' actions. As the verification process continued, the officers began to discuss the situation quietly among themselves. They reviewed the details, the discrepancies, and the unusual aspects of the identification and documents. The discussion was professional, focused, and cautious. They wanted to be thorough, ensuring that there was no error in their judgment. Meanwhile, the man listened politely to the questions, responding clearly and concisely, never revealing more than necessary. His presence was steady, his demeanor unshakable, and his patience remarkable. Passengers around the screening area began to notice the quiet tension. Some whispered among themselves, wondering if there had been a mistake or if a security threat had been identified. Others simply observed, intrigued by the unusual attention being given to this particular traveler. The man remained in the center of the attention, calm and composed, his quiet confidence contrasting with the subtle tension around him. The officers continued their work, methodical and precise. Ensuring that every detail was checked and verified, the minutes stretched on, each one filled with careful observation, repeated checks, and professional discussions. The officers maintained focus, fully aware of the responsibility they carried. They knew that even a small oversight could have significant consequences. The man, understanding the gravity of the situation, remained patient, demonstrating respect for the process and for the officers who were performing their duties diligently. His calm presence was both reassuring and intriguing, hinting at a deeper story that no one yet knew. As part one of this unfolding story draws to a close, the scene at the airport is set. A man, calm and composed, stands quietly under the scrutiny of trained officers. A briefcase has been inspected, identification documents have been reviewed multiple times, and databases have been cross-checked. The tension in the air is quiet but undeniable, a subtle mix of anticipation and curiosity. The ordinary routine of the airport has been interrupted, replaced by a moment of uncertainty and careful observation. Little do the officers know, they are about to discover an identity that will shock them and change the course of this routine morning entirely. The tension in the screening area grew slowly, almost imperceptibly, as officers continued to scrutinize the man in front of them. Each check, each phone call, each glance at the monitor added another layer of complexity to what had seemed like a simple security stop. Officers who had seen thousands of passengers a year knew when something was unusual, even if they could not immediately articulate why. This man, with his calm composure and polite manner, was becoming more than just a routine passenger in their eyes. They treated him with professionalism, but behind the disciplined exterior, there was curiosity and an unspoken sense that this stop was different from the rest. The man's identification had already been examined multiple times. His passport, driver's license, and travel documents were authentic, yet the system flagged minor discrepancies. Perhaps it was a detail in the database, a mismatch in the travel history, or simply an irregularity in verification codes. Officers are trained to follow procedure to the letter, so even the smallest anomaly required attention. They explained each step to him, their voices calm but firm, and he responded without complaint, quietly answering their questions and allowing them to perform every check. His patience and composure were remarkable, standing out amidst the hurried energy and occasional impatience of other travelers around them. As officers made additional calls to verify his details, they began to share observations quietly among themselves. One officer mentioned that the man's name and documents seemed highly significant, though they could not immediately confirm the reason. Another suggested cross-referencing multiple databases to ensure there was no mistake. Each conversation was measured and professional, a careful dance of ensuring safety without causing unnecessary alarm. While the man continued to cooperate silently, his calmness served as an anchor in the midst of a procedure that, for some, was stressful and unpredictable. Other travelers began to notice the unusual attention. Some stopped and glanced over, curious about why one passenger was receiving so much scrutiny. Others whispered to one another, speculating on possible security threats or unusual incidents. A few took photos discreetly, though most respected the area as a controlled security space. Yet, despite the growing attention, the man remained focused on following instructions, showing no irritation or frustration. His patience and understanding of the situation added an air of quiet dignity, setting the tone for a procedure that could have otherwise become tense and confrontational. The officers decided to perform a more detailed screening of his briefcase and personal items. They carefully opened compartments, examined folders, and inspected every corner for anything that could indicate a risk. The contents were simple and professional, neatly organized documents, a laptop, personal items, and nothing that appeared dangerous or unusual. Yet the procedure continued as protocol demanded absolute certainty. Even when everything seemed in order, officers were trained to dig deeper when minor inconsistencies appeared. The man observed silently, providing no interference, yet showing that he understood the seriousness of the security measures. Questions were asked about the purpose of his travel, the contents of his briefcase, and the nature of his work. The man responded clearly and calmly, never exaggerating or providing unnecessary details. His answers were polite, precise, and measured. Officers took notes and checked each statement against their records. The process was slow, meticulous, and demanding, but the man endured it with remarkable patience. His demeanor subtly shifted the energy around him, reminding the officers that professionalism was a shared responsibility. His calmness contrasted sharply with the subtle tension that had built in the screening area, giving the situation a quiet balance that kept everything under control. While this was happening, the officers' curiosity grew. They had encountered unusual travelers before, but few exuded the same composed authority and awareness of protocol. He seemed to anticipate the flow of questions and procedures, offering responses that were accurate without being defensive. This quiet confidence sparked whispered discussions among the officers, who speculated in hushed tones about the possible reasons for the anomalies they were seeing. Some wondered if he might hold an important role or have access to sensitive work, but without confirmation, it remained speculation. Every step of the verification process became increasingly crucial. As even a small mistake could have major consequences, the man's patience never wavered. He answered every question, complied with every request, and remained respectful throughout. He did not attempt to rush the process or assert any privilege. His behavior was almost instructive, demonstrating that cooperation and understanding could coexist with authority and importance. Officers, recognizing this, began to feel a subtle respect for him, even as they carried out their professional responsibilities. It was a delicate balance between ensuring security and acknowledging the human presence before them, and the man's demeanor made it easier for the officers to navigate this challenge. The process continued with additional verification steps. Officers made phone calls to other agencies, double-checked identification numbers, and reviewed flight manifests. Every step was documented, every decision carefully considered. The man remained quietly observant, answering questions when asked and maintaining a calm presence. His patience and demeanor prevented the situation from becoming tense, despite the growing curiosity of those nearby. Other passengers watched from a distance, some whispering, some simply observing, while the officers remained focused on the task at hand. The situation felt unusual, yet nothing in the environment suggested danger or chaos. It was an extraordinary moment contained within the ordinary. Routines of an airport. Hours seemed to pass in minutes as officers continued to perform checks. Their respect for procedure was matched by their growing sense of curiosity and anticipation. They began to realize that this might not be a routine passenger at all. The man's composure, the precision of his documents, and the subtle sense of authority he exuded suggested a significance beyond ordinary travel. They spoke quietly among themselves, exchanging theories, confirming details, and ensuring that nothing was overlooked. Throughout it all, the man remained a model of patience and cooperation, demonstrating a quiet understanding of the responsibility and seriousness of the situation. As verification progressed, the officers' awareness of the situation shifted. They began to understand that this was no ordinary encounter, that the person in front of them might occupy a position of significant importance. Yet the true scope of his identity remained unknown to them, and protocol required that they continue their meticulous checks without assumptions. The man continued to answer questions calmly, never asserting privilege, never expressing frustration, maintaining the dignity of someone who understood the value of rules and procedures. His presence subtly guided the officers, reminding them that the human element was just as important as protocol. Passengers around the area continued their quiet observation. Some speculated about security threats, while others whispered about the unusual attention given to one traveler. Yet no one could have guessed the extraordinary truth. The man remained patient and composed, calmly observing the interactions without attempting to interfere. His behavior contrasted sharply with the tension that could have easily arisen in such a situation. It was a lesson in patience, humility, and respect, demonstrated without words, leaving an impression on everyone present. The atmosphere in the screening area was a mix of professional focus and quiet anticipation. Officers were thorough, careful, and methodical, ensuring that every detail was verified. The man maintained his calm demeanor, answering questions politely and complying with procedures. Every interaction was a subtle dance of human understanding, patience, and professional responsibility. The unfolding situation highlighted the importance of careful observation, meticulous procedure, and respect for the human element. The man's calmness was a grounding force, preventing the situation from escalating and ensuring that professionalism remained the priority. As Part 2 comes to a close, the scene is filled with anticipation. Officers have completed multiple checks, made phone calls, and reviewed every detail of the man's documents and belongings. The man himself remains composed, patient, and quietly authoritative, his calm demeanor a contrast to the underlying tension of the situation. Other passengers have begun to notice the unusual attention, yet the true significance of the moment remains hidden. The story is building toward a revelation that will astonish everyone in the area, a truth that will redefine the ordinary morning into an unforgettable experience. The ordinary routine of airport security is about to intersect with an extraordinary discovery, setting the stage for events that no one will forget. The tension in the screening area had reached a subtle peak, though no one outside the officers fully realized why. The man continued to stand calmly, answering every question, complying with every request, and observing the process with a composed air. Yet behind the scenes, the officers were growing increasingly aware that they were dealing with someone extraordinary. The final verifications were underway, and the minor discrepancies in the system were beginning to take on a different significance. Phone calls were made to higher authorities, databases were cross-referenced multiple times, and each verification step seemed to take longer than usual. Every officer involved was acutely aware that the ordinary routine of a security stop had escalated into something exceptional. The man's calm demeanor remained unshaken as the officers worked through the final checks. He responded politely to questions about his identification, his work, and his travel plans. His patience and quiet confidence were striking. Even as the officers exchanged nervous glances, he remained composed, showing an understanding of protocol that few travelers could match. Observing him, one could sense a subtle authority, a presence that commanded respect without needing to assert it. While the officers maintained their professionalism, their curiosity and anticipation continued to grow. They were on the edge of discovering something remarkable, and the air seemed to vibrate with the tension of expectation after repeated calls and cross-checks. One of the officers received a confirmation from a higher authority that made them pause. Their eyes widened slightly and they exchanged looks of disbelief. The man they had been detaining and scrutinizing was not an ordinary traveler. He held a position of immense responsibility, a role that placed him at the top of one of the most important federal agencies in the country. The realization began to sink in slowly, each officer absorbing the enormity of the discovery in their own way. Shock, awe, and a touch of nervous excitement combined to create a moment that would be remembered long after the day ended. The officer who had made the verification quickly informed the rest of the team. The news spread quietly but rapidly among the officers in the screening area. Their faces reflected a mixture of disbelief and amazement. A man they had treated like any other passenger was, in fact, the director of the FBI. The magnitude of the revelation created a surreal atmosphere. Officers continued their work, but their approach shifted subtly. Respect, deference, and careful consideration now mixed with their professional diligence. The man remained calm and composed, his presence undisturbed by the change in perception around him. Other travelers in the area were oblivious to the revelation. They continued to observe the scene with curiosity, unaware of the extraordinary truth. Some speculated quietly about a potential security threat, while others wondered if the man was simply an important figure. No one could have guessed the reality. Meanwhile, the officers faced the challenge of maintaining professionalism, while processing the remarkable fact that a federal leader had been detained at their checkpoint. Their training guided them to handle the situation with discretion, patience, and respect. Ensuring that procedures were followed without causing unnecessary alarm, the man's calmness became a stabilizing force amid the sudden shift in dynamics. He answered additional questions without haste, complied with further checks, and maintained a quiet, dignified presence. Officers found themselves observing not just his behavior, but the subtle authority in his demeanor. His understanding of the procedures and willingness to cooperate reinforced the importance of protocol, showing that even someone in a position of great power respected the rules. This combination of authority and humility left a strong impression on everyone present. The officers began to engage in quiet discussions, deciding the next steps carefully. They needed to ensure that their approach reflected the extraordinary nature of the situation. Any misstep could have consequences, both professionally and publicly. They reviewed procedures, confirmed details, and prepared to adjust their approach without breaking protocol. The man continued to comply silently, never drawing attention to himself beyond what was necessary. His calm presence and measured responses demonstrated a remarkable understanding of both security procedures and human behavior, adding an element of respect and trust to the unfolding situation. Meanwhile, the passengers around the area grew increasingly curious. Some whispered, speculated, and tried to catch glimpses of the ongoing process. Yet, despite the growing attention, the man remained composed and focused. He did not appear impatient, frustrated, or self-important. His presence exuded quiet authority, the kind that commands respect without needing to assert itself loudly. Officers noticed this and adjusted their behavior accordingly. Recognizing that professionalism now required a heightened awareness of both human and procedural dynamics, the process continued with additional confirmation calls and verification steps. Each officer involved felt a mix of awe and responsibility. They were performing standard security procedures, yet the man before them was far from ordinary. The realization created a subtle tension, a quiet anticipation of what would come next. Every action they took was deliberate, every word measured, and every check performed with precision. The man's demeanor remained steady, showing patience, understanding, and a respect for both the officers and the process. His quiet authority created an unusual harmony amid the tension, balancing the procedural demands with the human element of the situation. As the officers completed the final steps of verification, a sense of relief mixed with astonishment began to settle over the group. They had confirmed the identity of the man in front of them. The realization that they had been detaining the director of the FBI created a moment of silent reflection. Their reactions were controlled but genuine. They had treated him according to protocol, maintaining professionalism. Yet the discovery highlighted the extraordinary nature of human interaction, patience, and respect within procedural systems. The man remained composed throughout the entire process. He thanked the officers politely, acknowledging their diligence and professionalism. His calm demeanor never wavered, and his humility was evident even in the extraordinary circumstances. Officers felt a profound respect for him, recognizing the combination of authority, patience, and understanding that he had demonstrated. The passengers around the area began to sense a change in energy. Noticing the subtle shift in the officers' behavior, though they still could not grasp the full significance of the event. In that moment, the officers reflected on the unusual turn of events. A routine security stop had transformed into an extraordinary encounter with one of the most powerful figures in the country. They had maintained professionalism, followed procedures meticulously, and treated the man with respect and patience, all while unaware of the extraordinary truth. The man's conduct had created a model example of cooperation, humility, and authority, leaving a lasting impression on everyone involved. The revelation also sparked internal discussions among the officers. They spoke quietly about how to document the event, how to handle the media if news spread, and how to ensure that procedures could accommodate such extraordinary situations in the future. The balance between protocol, respect, and recognition of human significance became a key point of reflection. Officers realized that their training and discipline had allowed them to navigate a delicate situation successfully, demonstrating that procedures, when executed with professionalism, could adapt even to unexpected circumstances. The man, having complied fully with the process, prepared to continue his journey. Officers stepped aside, offering apologies for any inconvenience and acknowledging his cooperation. His response remained polite and understanding, reinforcing the impression that true authority combines confidence, patience, and humility. The atmosphere, once tense and uncertain, shifted to one of quiet respect and acknowledgement. The ordinary routine of the airport resumed, but the memory of the extraordinary encounter lingered for the officers and travelers who had witnessed it. As Part 3 concludes, the scene has reached the pivotal moment of revelation. The man's identity, once unknown to the officers, has been confirmed, and the extraordinary nature of the situation has left a profound impact. The blend of professionalism, respect, patience, and quiet authority has transformed what began as a routine security check into an unforgettable experience. The story continues to unfold, moving toward the lessons learned, the reactions, and the reflection that will follow in the subsequent parts, leaving everyone involved with a sense of awe and a story that will be recounted for years to come. The confirmation of the man's identity brought an immediate shift in the energy of the screening area. Officers, who had been tense and cautious, now moved with a careful awareness that they were dealing with someone extraordinary. Each decision, each word, and each action was now weighed against the knowledge that the person in front of them was the director of the FBI. They had followed protocol, maintained professionalism, and treated him like any other traveler. But the revelation added a layer of significance that made the atmosphere charged with awe and subtle nervousness. The man, fully aware of the change in perception around him, remained calm and composed. He continued to answer questions politely, maintained his posture, and showed no impatience. His calmness had a grounding effect on the officers, reminding them that while the situation was exceptional, it still required measured action and respect for procedure. He acknowledged their diligence with subtle nods and polite words, reinforcing the human connection that had been established during the tense hours of verification. His humility was evident even in the extraordinary circumstances. Leaving a lasting impression on those around him, officers quickly adjusted their approach. They apologized for the inconvenience, expressed respect, and worked to ensure that the man could proceed smoothly while maintaining security protocols. The shift in their behavior was subtle but palpable. What had begun as a routine security stop was now a careful, respectful facilitation of the journey of one of the nation's most powerful figures. The balance between protocol, recognition of human significance, and professionalism became the guiding principle in every interaction. The officers found themselves navigating the delicate space between respect and responsibility. Awareness and procedure, travelers nearby began to sense the change in the atmosphere. Whispers filled the air as people speculated about the identity and importance of the passenger being treated with such care. Yet, even as curiosity grew among onlookers, the man remained composed, demonstrating that true authority is quiet, confident, and patient. His demeanor reflected an understanding of the value of rules, procedures, and human respect, which became an implicit lesson for both officers and witnesses. His presence reminded everyone that patience and humility can coexist with power and responsibility. As the man's verification concluded, officers continued to document the encounter meticulously. Reports were prepared, noting every step, every decision, and every verification performed. They understood that such a rare incident required clear and detailed records. The documentation was not only a procedural necessity, but also a testament to how professionalism and calm judgment could navigate an unusual and high-stakes situation successfully. Each officer reflected on their role, realizing that adherence to protocol, combined with respect for the individual, had created a harmonious resolution. The man prepared to proceed through the airport. Officers offered guidance, ensured his safety, and facilitated his passage through security without any further delays. The interactions remained polite, respectful, and professional. Even in a situation where power and authority were apparent, the man maintained a quiet humility that set a tone of mutual respect. Officers and witnesses alike were struck by the balance of confidence, patience, and dignity he displayed. His conduct highlighted that leadership is not only about authority, but also about understanding, empathy, and respect for others. Even in circumstances where the power dynamic could have been intimidating. Internal discussions among officers continued quietly. They spoke about the lessons learned from the encounter, how to handle similar situations in the future, and the importance of maintaining professionalism regardless of the individual's status. They reviewed procedures and discussed the ways in which protocol could accommodate extraordinary circumstances without compromising security. The incident became an immediate case study in the minds of the officers, a real-life example of the balance between diligence, respect, and human awareness. Each officer recognized the subtle but powerful impact that the man's presence and behavior had on them, shaping their understanding of professionalism and humility. Passengers, who had witnessed parts of the encounter, left with curiosity and quiet admiration. They may not have known the full details at the time, but they had observed an interaction that went beyond routine security checks. The man's calm demeanor, respectful responses, and composed presence created a human story amid the procedural environment. Travelers reflected on the importance of patience, understanding, and professionalism, seeing firsthand how ordinary interactions could become extraordinary through the qualities of the individuals involved. The officers, now fully aware of the man's identity, continued to handle the situation with discretion. There was no fanfare, no unnecessary attention, and no compromise of security. Their training, experience, and professional judgment allowed them to manage the encounter with care, demonstrating that protocols can coexist with respect and recognition of human significance. Every step taken was deliberate, guided by both procedure and awareness of the extraordinary nature of the situation. The man's cooperation and understanding made the process smoother and reinforced the lessons inherent in such an unusual encounter. As the man passed through the final stages of security, officers ensured that he had everything he needed for a smooth continuation of his journey. Their respect was evident in their demeanor and actions, But it was his humility and composure that left the most profound impression. He did not assert authority or demand special treatment. Instead, he allowed the ordinary procedures to guide the interactions while maintaining dignity and patience. This balance created an unforgettable example of how human behavior, patience, and respect can elevate even the most procedural and structured environments. The airport staff began to discuss the unusual occurrence quietly. Supervisors took note of the situation, ensuring that all officers involved were acknowledged for handling the stop professionally. The incident became a subject of discussion and reflection, highlighting how preparedness, protocol, and respect for individuals could coexist even in high-stakes environments. The man's identity, while not publicly disclosed to travelers at the time, was known internally, allowing the staff to understand the significance of the encounter and the professionalism required to manage it effectively. As Part 4 draws to a close, the story emphasizes the lessons and reflections arising from the encounter. The man, now moving through the airport, has demonstrated the power of patience, humility, and respect for procedure. Officers and staff have experienced a rare moment that will influence their understanding of professionalism, human interaction, and the delicate balance required in unusual situations. The ordinary routine of an airport has intersected with extraordinary human presence, leaving everyone involved with insights that extend beyond security procedures. The calm, measured, and respectful behavior of the man has transformed a routine morning into a story of remarkable human interaction, one that will be remembered and reflected upon for years to come. As the final moments of the encounter unfolded, the airport slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the impression of what had just occurred lingered in the minds of everyone involved. Officers reflected quietly on the extraordinary situation they had managed, recognizing the rare opportunity to interact with a person of such importance while maintaining professionalism and composure. The man, having fully cooperated with every step of the process, prepared to leave the screening area, embodying a remarkable blend of authority, patience, and humility that left a lasting impact on the staff and bystanders alike. As he walked through the terminal, the officers who had initially detained him exchanged looks filled with awe and quiet amusement. Their training had prepared them for countless situations, but few could compare to the experience they had just navigated. They realized that their actions, guided by procedure, had ensured safety without compromising dignity. The man had demonstrated that respect for rules, combined with calm understanding and humility, could transform even the most routine interactions into memorable experiences. Observing him, the officers silently acknowledged that leadership is not just about power. It is about conduct, presence, and the ability to inspire trust and respect without demanding it. Passengers, who had witnessed parts of the encounter, continued to speculate in hushed tones, intrigued by the unusual attention given to the traveler. They did not know the full story, but the subtle shift in energy around him had caught their notice. Even without knowing his identity, they sensed an extraordinary presence. Some smiled quietly, thinking about the rarity of witnessing a moment that felt different from ordinary airport interactions. The incident reminded them that even in crowded, procedural environments, human behavior and respect can leave a profound mark. The man's calmness and patience had quietly set an example, demonstrating that composure and dignity are as powerful as any position or title. Back at the security checkpoint, officers continued to process the event in their minds. They spoke softly to each other, reflecting on how the situation had evolved and what they had learned from it. Every decision they had made, every step they had taken, had been guided by procedure, but the human element had proven just as important. They recognized the balance required in handling unexpected situations, appreciating the importance of patience, attentiveness, and respectful communication. The encounter had highlighted the reality that even in highly structured systems, human interaction shapes the outcome and leaves lasting impressions on everyone involved. The man's presence had subtly influenced the staff. His demeanor was a quiet lesson in humility and leadership, showing that true authority does not rely on asserting control but on understanding, patience, and respect. He had navigated the situation with ease, adhering to rules while allowing the officers to perform their duties without feeling diminished or intimidated. The subtle guidance embedded in his calm behavior demonstrated that effective leadership often manifests in the smallest gestures: polite acknowledgement, quiet patience, and the ability to instill confidence in others. Officers found themselves reflecting on these qualities long after the encounter had ended, recognizing the impact of human conduct alongside protocol. As he moved toward the departure gates, the man's attention to others' experiences remained evident. He acknowledged officers' efforts with small gestures, brief words of gratitude, and a calm, confident presence. These gestures, though understated, left a lasting impression on those who had been directly involved in his verification. The encounter had been managed without incident, yet it had provided a profound example of how respect, patience, and professionalism intersect in meaningful ways. The airport, now returning to its normal pace, had experienced a rare and unforgettable lesson in human interaction and procedural diligence. The officers documented the encounter carefully, ensuring that every step, every communication, and every observation was recorded. This documentation served multiple purposes: confirming that procedures had been correctly followed, providing a reference for future rare situations, and reflecting on the extraordinary nature of the event. Each officer involved appreciated the opportunity to contribute to a story that would be remembered internally as a testament to professionalism and patience. They had acted correctly, respectfully, and decisively, and the man's demeanor had made the process smoother and more instructive. The passengers, though largely unaware of the man's identity, had witnessed the extraordinary calm and professionalism of the interaction. For them, it had been a glimpse into a rare human moment within a routine procedural environment. They saw respect, cooperation, and composure at work, creating a subtle impression of how extraordinary human behavior can shape experiences even in everyday situations. Some quietly reflected on the incident, recognizing that patience, humility, and respect are qualities that influence not only formal procedures but also interpersonal experiences. As the man passed through the final stages of his journey through the airport, the officers and staff quietly acknowledged the rare opportunity they had encountered. Their respect for his conduct, combined with the realization of his importance, created a moment of shared admiration. He had respected their role, adhered to protocols, and maintained a composed presence, transforming a simple procedural stop into a remarkable story of human dignity and professionalism. The experience highlighted that leadership and influence often reveal themselves in ordinary settings through extraordinary conduct. The story of this encounter would later be reflected upon in training sessions and internal discussions. Officers shared the experience, emphasizing the lessons learned about patience, procedure, and respect for individuals regardless of their status. It became a case study not only in security protocols but also in human interaction and leadership. The man's behavior demonstrated the profound effect that calm, respectful, and patient conduct can have on those around us, turning what might have been an ordinary day into a moment of reflection and learning for everyone involved. As the airport returned to its normal rhythm, the lingering impressions of the encounter remained. The officers who had verified the man's identity carried the story with them, appreciating the rare chance to interact with someone of such responsibility while practicing their professionalism. The man's humility, patience, and composure had left an indelible mark, highlighting that respect, understanding, and calm presence are as crucial as authority or position in shaping human experiences. This encounter would be remembered, discussed, and reflected upon for years to come, a testament to the power of human dignity and professionalism in even the most routine environments. The man, continuing his journey beyond the airport, had left an extraordinary imprint on everyone involved. His calm, measured, and respectful conduct had ensured that security protocols were followed without incident, while simultaneously teaching lessons of humility, patience, and leadership. Officers had experienced firsthand how ordinary procedures could intersect with extraordinary human presence, creating a story that would be recounted and reflected upon for years. Travelers had observed a rare moment, recognizing the subtle but powerful effects of human behavior in a structured environment. The incident became more than a simple security stop. It was a human story of dignity, respect, and the quiet strength of patience. As the story concludes, the lasting lesson is clear. Professionalism, patience, humility, and respect are powerful qualities that shape experiences, define interactions, and leave lasting impressions. The man's identity, once revealed, highlighted the extraordinary nature of the encounter, but it was his behavior that created the enduring impact. Officers and staff had navigated the situation with diligence and care. Passengers had witnessed subtle authority and calm composure, and the entire experience became a memorable story of human interaction and procedural excellence. The airport returned to its usual pace, but the story of this encounter would remain an enduring example of how humanity and professionalism intersect in unexpected, unforgettable ways.